We interview dads to reflect and just have some real life discussions about what are dads and what dad's all about, and just reflect on our experience. So those who are watching can learn from it, grow from it, become a better dad, and build a better relationship with their children. I must say, I put the disclaimer out, I'm not the perfect dad. And so this is a learning experience for me as well, to learn from others.
Well, I am. No, I was kidding. So.
You know, because women have these discussions. As men, we tend not to. And I just want to create a space where we can really have some discussions around it. So, but can you introduce yourself to?
Yeah. So my name is Curtis May, and been married 25 years, father of 3, which is my claim to fame, 3 daughters. So I have a company called Practical Wealth Solutions. So I've been in the financial industry for going over 35 years. We teach people principles that help our clients become and remain financially free. And so I'm a financial educator that helps people implement. And, I started this in college. I realized the NBA was not looking for 5'11" shooting guards. And, because, the rest is history, 1985 cents. And then, but I was lucky because I had a great father. I heard from the time I was 8, boy, you'll never make any money, work for somebody else. So I never really got that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying this is where I was brought up. You'll never make any money, work for somebody else. So my mother didn't have to work outside the house. We had a supermarket in North Philly. So I'm from Philly, from 12th and Master. I graduated from MontChristianAcademy. And but that was it. My grandfather was self-employed. So I kind of come from a background where I had a really strong role model, which is a key thing. Like, he had bad things, but from a dad, he was perfect in my mind. He had bad habits, but everybody's example, you're either a good one or a bad one. So that's one of the things that I try to put out there. Having, my dad would handle stuff, and we went out to dinner. He would buy. He was like Superman, So when I see how I interact, that's I have something to look to.
Yes, that's important, that you had a model in front of you that gave you a platform, somewhere to start. You want to start from ground zero, not having any example, and it was in your actual household, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, I saw him get up, go to work. This is before everybody had to be at all the little league games. My dad didn't see me. He didn't see me play basketball, 10 times, 15 times maybe. And I'm talking about from 7th grade through college. Because we had a store. She said, look, your store's got to be open, and and then you're dealing with cash business, and nobody's gonna watch your money like you. So. But one of the things I took from that, so I didn't want to be that person, right? So because you can look at that and you can say, my dad would drink too much. So they had bad habits that I didn't like and smoked, and I had to, this is what I don't like, right? And then because it's a choice, like you can see both things, you've got to decide. It's not a definite. And then he didn't make any much as my games as I would have liked, but I understood it. But so I've coached travel soccer 3 years. I was at all my kids' games, home and away, coached youth basketball, girls basketball. And so I structured my life and my business so that I could be there and do what I wanted to do. So, and it's interesting because most of the schools or these places I was in were mostly white. And so they, I need to create a role model of an intact Black family is a thing. Because, you go out, you probably experiences, you have to be the ambassador for Black people when you're on a plane, when you're whatever. Right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The world is on your shoulders.
Right. So you got to tip right. You got to all that stuff. Right. And, but that kind of stuff. So I made a decision that I was going to be there. I was going to be around. I was going to be involved because you got to know, I'm never a parent. I ain't your friend. So I'm kind of old school. It's like, no. And see, it's funny coming from Philmont. So you have certain principles, Judeo-Christian principles that you operate from. And a lot of people don't really have that. What are the Ten Commandments? What are they? What? So you got to have a philosophy or principles that you operate by. So I have really strong embedded principles about whatever. And I would say that's the key. You've got to have some principles of right and wrong. I'm very controlling of what I watch, what I read, what I listen to, what images I let in my head. And what I find is a lot of times I almost can't listen to the radio because I got to turn it every other song, because it's so hypersexualized. I can't stand it. Right. And so, but now they listen to it. So I can't put it on like Kids Bop on the even for my 11-year-old. She's like, what is this? I don't want to hear this. I want to hear Q102. Right. Yeah. So, or what's that thing? TikTok radio on the satellite on the car. But that kind of stuff. But you got to be cognizant of that kind of stuff. And I think people are not of the example that they're setting.
Yeah. And let's, pin right there, raising your child and you have all these influences, right? How do you counter that? Besides saying, don't do this, don't do that. What would you say to a person who is encountering that with their child and they just want to keep them on the straight and narrow?
It's hard, but you have to be involved. Like I know, or we knew all of our kids' friends, their parents. Okay. That's one. And I, as much as you could, I try to control what they're listening to. I mean, I don't want to be like nerdy, right? So you got to be somewhat cool. Okay. But we're mostly in where they were not the majority. So we tried to make sure they had a strong sense of self. I guess, talk about right and wrong. I mean, so that's why you got to know it. So I just try to be a good example of this or that. We will so for example, a lot of times if you're going in schools, they will pigeonhole you. Oh, your child has a deficiency. And then all of a sudden you're in interviews with people and they're telling you that, you got to have what's it called? What's it called? That thing?
IEP.
IEP. I was going to say something else. And okay, but we'll take some help, but we're not going to do this. So they were shocked because we were like, listen, my mother-in-law was an English teacher. My wife's an attorney. I'm the dumbest one, but I'm pretty smart. Right. And so they can read and write. We talk for a living. You know what I mean? So you gotta, like with school stuff, you have to have enough confidence academically to push back and not just, get pigeonholed into this and that. So because you have to be there. Like a lot of times I used to do the retirement plans in the public schools. I had West Philly High, I had Smedley Elementary. So I had West Philly, I had Chester. So now if you go to a parent-teacher meeting, I'm in Delaware County, so at Haverford High School, for example, but any of these schools out here, you can't find a parking space on a parent-teacher night. It's whereas I remember, in Philly, they couldn't get them to come to school and, it's hard, and so you have to be involved. I mean, you got to be there. You got to look, if you're going to have them, you got to be there, and that's my thing. I think you have to be involved. I don't know how to say it other than that. I mean, I was involved. I mean, I'm married, so that's kind of step one. But that's a different show.
Yeah.
Get married and have children. It's an order to this stuff. We want to buy a house and live together. Some guy told me, yeah, we're going to move in. We're going to get a house. Oh, did you miss a step? What did your parents say? But see, that's not popular. But like I said, I have principles, right? So I don't care what's popular because principles don't change, and so you don't have situational ethics. You got to have a principle that you operate from, that you believe in. And I don't care who else believes or not. I don't care what the world thinks. It's how was I taught about right and wrong? And so that's critical. I think too many people don't have a foundation of right and wrong, of this is my expectation of I'm there. I expect you to win. Our kids were fortunately, my daughters are really smart and they got in a group where all the girls were like 1,500 SAT scores, right? So she was drafting in the top, the honors courses, this and that. So as an expectation, they would burst out in tears. They got a B plus, you know? And so now, and they're to a point where I couldn't help with their homework, but you know, we made sure they got into the right stuff. You know, if there was, my wife would find stuff like if there was they were in a top reading class, and then she found out there was another special group on top of that. So she called the principal and, why is not my daughter in this thing? You know, and so you got to advocate for your kids.
Right.
Is another key. You got to advocate for, you can't just, you know, it's not a passive thing. You know, you can't you don't know what the hell they're teaching in public schools. You have to be there. And don't get me started. It's like a Marxist indoctrination camp with all this woke mentality. I'm not trying to hear that. Like, it's like you're like, if there's teaching something crazy that I don't believe in, I will look at the agenda. I'll go to school, and you won't be there that day because you're not. I don't want to hear it's okay for little boys to sleep with other little boys. You're not. I'm not down for that. With that, and I will take you out of school and put you. Where I believe the principles I want to be espoused are being taught.
My daughter's school, I know whenever they would talk about like sex education, something that is, you know, a little shaky, maybe something you probably want your parents to talk about first. They'll send a letter home, and you know, you give your approval. If you don't want them introducing or discussing that with your child, and you want to keep that at home, you have the option.
Right. Right. But see, and so where we went to school and where you're at school is, you know, sex education is between a man and a woman. There ain't no other. Where you feel like you are today, all that dumb stuff that people are trying to push. So, you know, that's, I mean, you got to be clear on that, and not, I don't care if it's unpopular or whatever. This is the truth. So it doesn't matter. See, that's why, you know, as a father, you're the king, you're the head of the household, right? You set the tone of that, right? And so now that means you need to have your stuff together. I was almost going to curse. And you need to have your stuff together, and you need to show up. You need to produce. You need to get better all times. What are you reading? What are you watching? What are you listening to? What are you doing to be a good producer and be a good steward of your resources? You know, so I'm in a personal finance guy. So to me, you know, if 60% of the marriages end in divorce, and 2/3 of that 60% is behind monetary stuff, right? If you don't, I used to work with couples, and they would invite me over and they'd argue through me, right? And well, she don't do this and she don't do this. I'm like, listen, I can leave. Y'all can have this conversation without me, right? And then when I got married, I went with Bishop Newkirk. I went through counseling, and I could see, okay, all these people never got to ask these questions before they got married. And you know, and because it's not, you just have to be committed that I'm going to have a winning family. I think it starts with, what do you want? What's your vision you see for yourself, right? And I had a role model of what this looked like, what I was supposed to be doing. I had to produce. I couldn't be sorry. I couldn't be not working. You know, people are out of work for like 6 months a year. I'm like, what? Every time it's never taken me, if I ain't had jobs in 2003, and even then it was for 13 months. But if I ever wanted a job, it's never taken me more than 2 weeks to find one. So when people say I've been out of work, but don't want to work, or you got to work on having some skills, because money is a result of creating value in the marketplace. So if you don't make enough money, that means it's not the government's fault. That means you don't know how to do anything, and you need to work on yourself. Because guess what? If you're doing that, and you're getting up, going to work every day, and you're reading a book every day, and you're listening to motivational stuff, and you're constantly working on improving yourself, guess what? Success leaves clues. And like I started out with, everybody's an example. You're either a good one or a bad one. So what are they modeling?
Yeah. But you know what? I remember with us.
You met me at what? How was I? Late 20s, early 30s? I was way more intense than I am now.
I was about 24.
Yes.
I was about 24. And I remember one of the things you used to echo It's not taught, it's caught.
Yes.
You know, how many times I have used that in different settings, because it makes sense. It makes sense. And so I think that as we parent, especially as fathers, well, just period, as parenting, period, but as fathers, you know, I'm not like I can't let fathers off the hook, right? A lot of times things are put on the mother, and the mother has to carry a lot of weight. But I think as fathers, we should shoulder a lot of that weight as well.
We should shoulder most of the weight, right? And because they're working hard. And let me share your thought off, because you made me trigger the thought. But go ahead, finish your thought. I'm sorry. This is an interview. All right.
So as we as we do those things that you're talking about, you know, reading the right books, you know, I add in going to church, praying, treating our spouse correctly, like that's, as we're teaching that's caught. Like you caught your father, like you watched your father over time, that's caught. So it's not just me giving you lip service. I'm actually watching you carry out what your lip service is saying.
Right. That's right. Because not what you say is what you do. They're watching what you do. You could say all that stuff, but you know, 90% of communication is body language, tone of voice, and your actions. What are you doing? Not what you're telling me not to smoke, but you smoke.
Right.
You know, just for little stuff like that. You shouldn't be gambling, but you gamble. You're out at your casino, giving them your money every day. You're doing all this. Well, you're drinking and driving. You telling them to drink and drive. So it's like you're telling them not to curse, but you're cursing all the time, like a sailor.
Right.
What are they going to do what you do? We let them listen to all this music where it's all hypersexualized cursing, and you know, I remember going to this kids party. They know all the words. So all these little nasty songs. I was like, it's at 6.
Yeah.
That's bad parenting.
Yeah.
You know, you're not involved in anything. You just let them come home. You don't make them read. They should be in some sport. You need to be involved. I mean, you know, because what happens, what they say, out of mind is a devil's workshop. So, you know, you have to, now you got to kind of get them in some organized stuff, because I like the team building of, you know, being the discipline of, you know, tennis or soccer or basketball. And I like, you know, so I have daughters, I like to do stuff that are, you don't want to just do the same old basketball, track. You know, there's other stuff out there where you can get exposure to other stuff. You can get you know, I don't think you should play for education, because most of y'all kids, I used to tell my parents, well, I used to coach at Lower Merion Soccer Club. I used to tell my parents, I had a personality type, household income, $200,000-$300,000 a year parents, and they all thought their daughter was like the second coming of Mia Hamm, you know, who was big when I was, you know, I was like, listen, none of y'all. I think as one kid, and nobody I coached, they were all 18 and going to things and tournaments. A couple of them went to Duke, ain't none of them played soccer. After the senior year of high school, they ain't look at a damn soccer ball, you know. And so we put too much into it. You know, what you want them to do is, like, if I want to coach youth sports, what do I want them to learn? I want to learn how to win. I want them to learn how to prepare to win, because success doesn't teach you anything. Okay. I would tell my kids, I'll say, listen, we were guesting on this soccer team, and we playing on this travel team that's separated from the other teams. So I was at a tournament watching them. Girl, this is like what, 15, 16-year-old talking back to the refs. The mother is obnoxious, yelling at the refs, and the door is the same way. And so if I was the coach, I was like, get your butt over here. You know, you're a child. I don't even care if the person was like a 20-year-old. They're the ref. You respect them. And if there's something to be said, I will talk to the ref. You don't talk to your ref, and you tell your mother to be quiet, or I'll go over and talk to her mother. So listen, you know, because I have to tell a parent, don't coach from the sideline. I don't need no help. You know, now it helped by the time I was doing this, because the guy I ended up being coach, he was like 28. So he didn't know how to deal with these parents. But by the time they called me, I was like 40 something, and I'm dealing with these people professionally. So I have no problem telling you what to do, you know. And so you got to have a certain level of maturity, which you grow into. I mean, you don't start out like that. So just because you had a baby don't mean you're a father. Let's start with that. Okay. And you're a sperm donor. You know, my wife is an attorney. So, you shouldn't have going in the court system saying that you need to take care of your child. That's a given. You had them. It costs money. You know, I'm to give her $300 a week. What is that? That is nothing. $1,000 a month. That is nothing. Right. So You know what I mean? And so now here's the other side of that. I had friends that were child support and this and that, this and that, this and that. I was like, I'd tell young guys, don't leave home without your raincoat, right? If you got to have that kind, I'm not be the one, but I'll counsel young guys to listen. If you're not ready, once you do this, this is, next 18, not 18, because it's more than that, right? But that's your responsibility.
Right.
Okay. And so if you're not prepared for that, then you have to think about and who you're with, right? Because if you're a father, what you got to do, my pastor said, he used to say, you have to marry a virtuous woman, so you have to be careful. Do I see this woman in my life? Can she, I knew when I was dating, I was like, all right, I'm going to, what I'm starting to do now, win trips and go to these banquets where I've got to wear tuxes, and I'm working with a company trip to take me to Scotland. We're going to have all types of events. So I couldn't have somebody that's not comfortable in these professional environments, so I had to pick, I knew I was going to do that. So I couldn't get somebody that was, uncomfortable around white people or whatever. You had to be able to understand the protocol and be in those type events depending on the world that you're in. So right. I was selective about even when I was dating, I was selective about that, and so it starts there, so that now it's two of y'all, because it takes two. This is a team thing, but you've got to understand your role as a provider. You have to be a producer. You've got to set the tone morally for your household.
Right.
I'm not saying I'm perfect at all this, okay? But
no, it's a work in progress. It's a work in progress.
Work in progress.
Is it safe to say the way you approach your your relationship maybe even still while you are, because even though you're married, you're still dating, right? You're still trying to keep it new.
Right.
You're trying to not get stale, and
I need to get better with that, but yes.
Right, not expire, right? And yes, I'm working on it. My wife, because she's so spontaneous, she keep me on the edge. The way you approach investing can be the same way you approach a relationship.
You have to invest in it. If you don't communicate, because I have to work at that, because I am very tunnel vision. Like, I get up, I'm self-employed, so I have to, if I don't, I have to produce, like, two types of people in the world. There's work creators, where you show up, you do your job, you get a check on Friday, and there's work creators, right? I am a work creator. I have to make stuff happen, and there's no revenue generated. So I get in that mode because I have to generate clients. I'm doing workshops, so I'm doing this and that because I live on commission. And so I can get in that view and not think about nothing else, because I'm worried, I'm definitely afraid of being poor. So, of poverty. So I'm always trying, why? Because then if they, Dad, I want to go to Europe, I need $4,000. I got this and that, which I have 3 daughters. I'm getting those type of requests all the time. So it's like, all right, I not spoiling them, but I want to be able to do what I'm supposed to do. So sometimes I'll maybe get hyperactive on the production side, but then, I believe in work hard, play hard. I've already been on, what years? As we record this, is May. I've already been on 3 or 4 trips.
Okay.
Because I was taught, if you don't, especially as an entrepreneur, if you want to double your income, you need to double your time off. Because if I'm driving all this, I have to rest and recharge and come back, boom, let's ready to hit it again. And so you've got to, I think you have to, even when we were broke, relatively speaking, broke, my wife would say, all right, we're going to go, our kids read, we're in this book, Louisa May Alcott, Little Women. And so at like 6 or 7, so we got a hot wire, got a $40 hotel room, like a Holiday Inn or something in, or like one of those little, Fairview Inn, Fairfield Inn, whatever, in Concord, Massachusetts. We drove up. And so we did a Louisa May Alcott tour that was free. And then there was the Plymouth Rocks. We're in Massachusetts, right? And so we went to dinner. We got some lobster, came back. The whole thing was under $300, but we created great experiences, educational experiences, right? Because it was based on what they were reading. So we took what they were reading, went to the original author, her house, who wrote Little Women, and they were friends with, Thoreau. They knew Harriet Tubman. So around that time, where they were formed schools for kids, and they brought physical education for girls because they didn't do that kind of stuff. So they were all contemporaries around that stuff. So we learned that kind of stuff. They were like, my kids were like 6 and 4 at the time. I still remember that trip.
Yeah. And you know what? And going back to the very beginning, when you were starting off, it's a shame that as African Americans, we have to like be diligent in setting the example and erasing the stereotypes that has been set before us. You're doing those things and you're showing them. Cosby had on as a Cosby show, with the Cosby Show, it's possible. It's not just fiction. It
Listen,
actually
that is
happens.
so
This happens
funny
every
because
day.
people, when the Cosby Show was on, because he's from North Philly, right? So I have people like my parents' age knew him, right? And so when I was around that age, it was the big show, Good Times and JJ and Dynamite. That was living in the projects. That was totally unrealistic to me. Okay. And so when the Cosby Show came out, they're like, oh, this is not realistic. That's my neighborhood. That was my reality. My neighbor, I had a school teacher over here. My right neighbor on the right side owned 2 gas stations. The other one had a gas station. I had a police sergeant. I had a teacher next door. You know what I mean? It was, I had it was a, like a middle class Black oasis in the ghetto, where Yorktown, right? And so that was the vision of that. So that wasn't, so that's what I perpetuate. And then when I went to Philmont, whatever they did, they said you could do. We went skiing. I learned how to skate, right? This is a guy named Andrew Brown. He went to I worked at Camp of the Woods. We used to go there. It was like a Christian camp. I played at basketball camp up there. And I went there and then I worked there as a camper. So he came up, he was at this lake across the way. He says, listen, if he left his sunfish, his little sailboat there, he said, if you want to use it, you can. So I was like, okay. So I quasi know how to sail. So I like sailing, I like kayaking. I like everything that they don't think I'm supposed to know how to do. They want to say, if you want to have some Black man put it in the book. I read on it when I'm really focused on learning something. I might read a book a week, on economics, on stuff. So I'll surprise people when I go to events. I'm constantly shocking people how much I know about economics, about this and that, because I'm well read, because you need to be interesting. And then I just like to know, I'm a nerd. So I was all city and basketball when I was a closet nerd. So I was low-key smart. And but that's what you got to do. So you have to break. I think as a Black man, I think that you have to be, and it doesn't matter what you do for a living, but you can't be whatever you are. I have people that are contractors I got a guy as a contractor, one of my clients, and he didn't go to college. This guy is a multimillionaire, and he's got the equivalent of a PhD in AVHC or contracting or reading blueprints, because there's different types of genius. But he went to school, and he's, in my mind, the Michael Jordan of contractors. You know what I mean? And can look at stuff, and that kind of stuff. So it's different types of geniuses. So the road to success is not through college. Like I think people don't do trades enough. It's like, because we don't teach people how to make money, right? How to be an apprentice, how to learn some meaningful skill that will allow you to provide for your family. And I think sometimes the schools have failed that. They took vocational stuff out of there, where you could literally, I have a guy right now, he went to Dobbins. He's one of my clients. Dan Harvey, look up Dan Harvey if y'all listen to this on YouTube. Dan went to Dobbins, went right to school, did an internship at Scepter, worked at Scepter for like the next 15 years, from like 18 to like 30 something. His mother was a real estate. He got into real estate. He was an electrician at Scepter, right? And then he did that part-time, and he left Scepter, and he was still questioning it. He was making $20,000 a month part-time buying property.
Right. Yeah.
And then, with this trade and learning how to fix stuff and wire stuff, and then just teaching himself how to do it. And, now he's going on, he's one of the top, real estate investors in the city, and he's teaching classes and, that kind of stuff. It's a great guy. And, but that was, he became that, because what happens is most of this stuff is not, stop looking for somebody to give you something. Investing, we teach people is about becoming something, right? If you want to become a good father, you have to see, what I've always been, I would pick role models, right, that I could follow on whatever I wanted to learn. Business, when I was in high school, I read George Gervin shot 600 shots a day, because I would read books, big men, big little men of the NBA, and I would read biographies to look for the clues. And then I would look for a clue of what I can do. So, so I've given you a bunch of clues. What are you reading? What are you listening to? What are you watching? Because, Jim Rohn would say most people don't have a money problem, let's say, because I'm a financial person, let's say money problem, they have a philosophy problem. And
Right.
so if you have a bad philosophy, so this is everything, right? You have a bad philosophy, you're going to have a bad attitude. If you have a bad attitude, you're going to have bad actions, what you do, right? If you have bad actions, you're going to have bad results. And if you have bad results, you're going to have a bad outcome, right? And so if you can apply that to money, you can apply that to relationships, you can apply that to diet, you can apply that to raising kids, because, and most of us have an attitude problem, because it's one time I did a thing at a homeless shelter. I did like I used to work with do a lot of free workshops, and so I would put my money where my mouth is, right? I've taught like the richest man in Babylon to homeless people at Ready, Willing, and Able, because I'm like, what can I get across to them? I'm like, what am I going to speak? They barely work, but there's principles, right? And so I would put my money in my work, because you're supposed to give your time, your talent, your treasury. So I would kind of teach this stuff. But what happens is, when you listen, it's the daily decisions that people make that in the moment don't seem like a big deal. But if you, because you have a bad attitude, you have a bad philosophy and a bad attitude, you keep making a series of bad decisions, who you hang out with, what you listen to, what you read, that's messing up your decision making. You're gonna have a bad result. I had this young guy call me yesterday. He's like 24. He's like, oh, he found me on Instagram. And so I was giving him a 15-minute consultation. I didn't stand on the phone for about 40 minutes, because I was like, well, I'm making beats, and I'm not gonna lie, I get high every week. And he's down in Florida. I said, well, okay. Well, how, if you're blazing up every day, how focused can you be? Your mind is not clear. Okay. You can't do what everybody else does. You have to wake up. You got to figure out something you want, and you have to go for it. Right. And so I said, look, you can't leave home without your raincoat. So we went there. Right. I said, listen, you don't have any kids. No, then you can't afford them. You're making $400 a week. You need to get your stuff together. Okay. Because you ain't good to nobody if you're not making any money. If you're not. So what do you want? So I went there with him. He followed me on Facebook, not on Facebook, on Instagram. And so I could see, I said, let me see what you're doing. And I want you to check on me every month. What'd you read? What'd you do? I gave him an assignment. I want you to say 15% of every check. And I want to see that you open up this account and that you're funding it. Just check in with me. Let me know what you do. And so I think that as men, he was a 24-year-old young guy. So he's like, oh man, nobody's told me this stuff. I appreciate you so much. That's what you got to do. Right. Whether they're your kids or not, they're somebody's future husband.
Right. And you know what? And look, it's we always say it's a small world. We're in this thing together, and you better take care of them, because it could come back. So that young man can meet your daughter down the line.
Yeah.
It's possible. We may think, well, that's rare, but you never know.
Yeah, look, one time I took my daughter, we was like 12, we went to a movies, right? So how when you're walking, the guy's supposed to be, for those you don't know, all right, because that's a test, like the Sunny test with the Bronx Tale, she's supposed to open the door for you. So my wife, you failed this test like 3 times. I showed her a clip from the movie. And so look up Bronx Tale, the Sunny test. And so I said, all right, if you're out, I said, listen, the boy is supposed to be closest to the street. So if I'm walking, I said, look, we have switch places. You make me look bad, right? So, you got to be on the outside. I said, well, why is that? Because I told the history of it. Right. If it was a horse and carriage and the water splashes, you're supposed to protect the woman. Or if you're in a suit, New York, people would dump their trash out the window. And so they would walk underneath, and you're the one that's supposed to take the brunt of that. So your job as a man is to protect. Do you know that?
Right.
Do you know to
protect them?
Start with, if you go to a restaurant, so you take your kids to restaurant. My parents take us to restaurants, so we knew how to eat. We knew how to use the forks. We knew that kind of stuff. I mean, that you got to learn that somewhere, and so where do you learn? I mean, when the Supremes and stuff were, in the Motown, they put them through etiquette courses.
No, the things you're talking about is actually in my description of what a daddy is.
Wow. Yeah, you see that? Yeah, I'm looking. I was like, what is he pointing to? Okay, yeah. So I don't know. That's what I do, but I don't know that, I had a good role model. It was helpful that I was about 36 before I had our first baby. So I was, wasn't my first rodeo. It wasn't my first rodeo, actually. So I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I was mature by that time. Yeah. So I had done my wilding out through my 20s. So, but again, I always had a solid moral foundation. I think that's key, and because of the business I was in, I was always focused on personal development, always trying to get better, always. So that gives you a certain discipline. And I try to instill that. Like, I like sports. I tell my kids, listen, I used to tell them at the school they were at, listen, if it's a tie, you're going to lose. So don't make it a tie. You need to be better. We ain't marching around talking about how it's racist, the teacher's racist. No, you need to get better. See, because I'm not going to let you be weak, and give up, and I would say, you got to run your race. It's like running 400. Like you compete, but don't compare. Don't look around. You just run your race. You trust your training and you run, come out hard on the corner, opened up on the straightaway, run the corners hard. And when you end up at the final 300, you let your form and your training get you through the final 100 meters. That's life. And then I don't care if you win or lose. What I care is that you get better every time. So, because what I like about track and swimming, for example, as a analogous for life, is you're always focused on your personal record, right? So I don't care if you won the heat or whatever. If your time went down because you're training every day, getting better and measuring it, that carries. That's how I run my business now. See, that learning how to prepare to win, learning how to work, that's what it is. And I tell you what, the time my daughter was like, we were, what was I doing? I was they ran a track meet, right? And so it was a Thursday or Friday, and then we had the finals like either that Saturday or Sunday, right? So I said, all right, look, we're going to work on your corners. Yep. So if you want another question, I can finish that story, or you can ask something else.
Right. Yeah, you could. Well, you go ahead. You say turn the corner.
So we turned the corners. So I made her. We did like, I don't know, like 10. Run these quarters hard. Work on your starts. And then she was crying like, oh, I don't want to do this. Nobody else is doing this. I was like, because my wife is even starting to cake. No, maybe they should stop. I was like, no, again, get on line, And so, like a maniac that I probably am, but guess what? The next day, how was she? 12 or 13? She had a 28. Sorry, basically she PR'd in the 200.
Her personal best.
Yep. And then, which took her to the next round where we got to go run in upstate New York at the next level. And then that next level, they're 4x4. We made it down to Greensboro at U12. Now we got knocked out in the first round, but they progressed individually. She got knocked out individually, but the team made it. And, but what happens is she advanced because I made her work on that stuff. And hopefully I made the point that, listen, you have to learn to push through the discomfort, the initial discomfort. So, whether most time, because people will let their kids, well, I don't feel like it. Who cares what you feel like? Feelings my dad said, look, feelings ain't got nothing to do with nothing. Business and feelings have nothing to do with each other, you tell me. And so it's what needs to happen. And you need to do it, and maybe you'll feel good about it, but you need to do it, feelings or not. See, we're all concerned about comfort, and I don't feel like it, and I don't give a damn if you feel like it or not. You're going to do this. You're going to school, okay? Because you have to learn how to, and this is from basketball, you got to learn how to play hurt sometime. And I think that's a father's job to push them through that. Be strong enough to push them through that, to be focused, because these kids are too soft. So I'm not politically correct. All right. So y'all can take that for what you're worth. Yeah. But I that was where I come from. I told you I saw Shaft at 8, and I went to the John Shaft School of Sensitivity.
Yeah, I think you hit a good point. It is a father's job to be that visionary and see what's in them. Talking about, this whole interview, you've been talking about understanding and knowing your children. And so if you know that they have another gear, push them to the other gear so they can know that
they have another gear. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
They can take it to the next level, and they can exceed everyone else and not be in the back and be comfortable with everybody. I tell people when I do my entrepreneur class, being an entrepreneur is a lonely place.
Yep.
Right. And I dare to say, as you're striving for success, there's going to be some lonely times because everyone can't go with you.
And you prepare for that. So you've got to find other people. That's why the power of associations is so important. Who you watch, read, listen to, hang around. Right. And so I think as parents, you have to, that's really critical, is because they hang out with knuckleheads, they're going to be a knucklehead.
Right. And so parents can't hang around knuckleheads.
That's right. You can't, and you
You know,
can't
so
let them
we have
knuckleheads
to
around
model,
your people.
you
You
preach.
know, they're great. You love them, but we don't have the same values. I can't have uncle whatever in and out of prison. Now you ain't coming to my house.
Mhm. So I know we're coming to an end. Two things. If you can define daddyhood, because I always say, and you kind of hinted on it before about anybody can be a father, but everybody can't be a dad unless you are willing to put the time in. So if you can just basically in 60 seconds
Hmm.
explain what daddyhood is to you.
Well, I think that you have to love them, lead them, make sure that you're providing a good example, right? It's just not being a sperm donor. You have kids and you don't call them, you don't take care of them, you see them every 3 years. What is that? Send them. I know people that rich kids send them to boarding school. Why have them then? If you go send them away from seventh grade or whatever, and you have to mold them. They have to be parented. Like, people say, "Oh, your kids are great. They graduated. They're just so wonderful." They're wonderful because we are like very hands-on in
Mm,
terms of pushing them and making sure in the right classes, making sure they know how to, somebody gives you a gift, you send them a handwritten thank you card, that kind of stuff. Like, well, how do you know to do that if somebody don't teach you that? Now, does that stuff carries in business? So you have to be a role model. And so if you don't know to do that stuff, that's all right, because there's nothing new under the sun. You have to get better. We have to get better every year, every quarter. You
mm,
have to get better at a person because again, I felt it was my responsibility to be a good example of work, of focus, of commitment, of fidelity, of all that stuff. And so that's what it means to me.
okay. And I think that's very important what you said. And even if, because I know I'm a work in progress, but I'm not afraid to um, make that known to my children. Like if something that I'm not doing right, I will self-correct and explain to them going forward, this is what the expectation is, or this is what should be done. And I'm pretty sure you face it with dealing with finances and working with family with finances and family trying to get their finances in order. They got to stop somewhere, and every day is a day for a new beginning. And so for children to actually go through that process with you, to learn how to read bank statements, to learn how to look at investments, um, and be good stewards of their money, it's like learning on the job.
Mhm.
Mhm.
They've lost it. I'm still working through it right now. I got two about to be 20-year-old and 22-year-old. So it's like, all right, it's like starting over. Because I used to play cash flow with them. I had my youngest one, she's like 11. I had this software and I'd give her, I taught her how to use it. Here are the bank statements. This goes here, this goes there. And I would literally have her do my financials
Okay.
and try to show her, but I know that why I did that because there's this guy interviewed on my show. He's got like a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio. He had his 11-year-old daughter doing the books and paying her like 30-50 cent a transaction that she did and would pay her, and she was good. And then so somebody else was messing up, said, "Dad, I can do it, for this price." And she did a good job, but because she had
Wow.
been doing it and she felt, I was like this, I was like, oh man,
Wow.
I'm lunching. I need to, get them on that stuff because you start early. I started working on my desk store at 8,
Yeah.
and I wasn't particularly good at anything, but I stamped the stuff, I wrapped the meat, I went to my grandfather to the docks to pick up produce. I went to, he learned how somebody showed my dad how to cut meat. So we would go get those, like you see Rocky, them punching
Mm.
the stuff. I'd been there at 5, buying
Yeah.
that stuff. We had a little corner where they would call the poppy stores now. And so, all I saw was work
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Explain.
productivity.
Yeah.
And, so how do you do anything else?
Yeah. 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 That is key. That is key. But Curtis, I thank you. I appreciate your time. And this has been a delight for me. Hopefully, it's been the same for you, and for anybody who's watching, the same for them. So thank you, and appreciate you, and look forward to working with you in the future with our collaboration.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks. I hope I'm long-winded. So hopefully I was able to share so you can glean some stuff out of this. I'll listen to this more than once. And thank you for putting this out there. I think it's important. I mean, it's just wealth starts at home, and so one of the things is there are outside people trying to break up the family unit, right? And a lot of the woke politics is trying to break up the family unit. A lot of the government programs trying to break up the family unit, separating fathers from the household. That is the downfall of the Black community, right? And so you've got to
Definitely.
Like I said, it goes back to everybody's example, you're the good one or a bad one. So I'll leave y'all with that. And thanks for having me. Anytime you want to do it. I don't know if I've said everything, but I got lots of opinions about lots of stuff.
No, you're good. This was great. This is great.
Thank
And
you.
thank you. Appreciate you. And I'll be talking with you.
All right.
All right. That was Curtis May. Curtis May, a Practical Wealth, the Practical Wealth Show. I hope this was a delight for you, because it was a delight for me, just to hear some key principles of how he see daddyhood, and how daddyhood has worked in his life by seeing the example. Like you said, you either going to be a good example or a bad example. And truly, he has benefited from a good example with his father showing him the ropes with business, and being a committed daddy to this family. And so I hope this was helpful for you. Some of the things that he shared can be applied in your life, can be good for discussion with other men who is trying to be dads, even your wife, as you are like me. This conversation would definitely go back to my household in regards to how he see daddyhood, and some of the things that can be actually applied to my personal life. So Curtis, thank you. And I wish you the best in what you do with the Practical Wealth Show, and the families that you're touching on a daily basis. And guys, till next time, next interview, we go with Daddyhood. And I encourage you, if you want to be part of this movement, you want to be interviewed, I'll be glad to interview you, and you can share your perspective about daddyhood, and how you are a work in progress. I know I'm not perfect, but I'm a work in progress, striving to be better. Let's go get it. Let's do it. Let's go be a better version of ourselves. In the name of flow, for love or wisdom, I'm Saeed. Talk to you later. Peace.